ready?
Got open man. DJ Moore. End zone. Touchdown. Touchdown Bears.
I am Jeff Joniak.
Blitz is on. Down he goes. Oscar.
What was it like playing for Coach Ditka?
I don't want to answer any questions like that.
Pressure coming. He's in big trouble. Down he goes. Montez Sweat.
And etc.
Now, Bears Etc. brought to you by Geico, with the voices of the Bears, Jeff Joniak and Tom Thayer.
One more look back before we start looking ahead to what's next for your Chicago Bears, episode 127 of the Bears Etc. podcast with Super Bowl winning Bears guard Tom Thayer. I'm Jeff Joniak. Bears Etc. brought to you by Geico. Good to have you along. Dig a little deep in some statistics here, Tommy, and what could have made it better. And then we're going to throw our Players of the Year on the table today as well. Should be a fun little conversation. No guests today as we put a wrap on things. We'll be coming at you now once a week during the offseason starting next week, so be sure to make sure you check us out, and wherever you get your podcast, we'll have some good guests for you and some things off the beaten track a little bit. I'm excited about it, Tom. We've enjoyed doing this podcast, no question. Can't believe we've already done what will now be 127 of them.
There's a lot to bring to the fans of the Bears, and there's a lot to talk about. And I don't think I've ever come off of an offseason with as much as an anticipation as there was this past season, especially when you look at the draft choices in Caleb and Rome Odunze, even though you didn't know who was coming aboard, just where they were in the draft. And then all of a sudden that led up to the Hall of Fame game. Then that led up to Hard Knocks. And that led up to, every practice you saw in OTAs and training camp. It kind of caught your attention because you saw, some really significant bright spots of the future when you talk about Caleb and Rome.
Right. And there are many others. There's no question.
Yeah,
I know there are many others, but I know we were all excited about it. We were all excited. I think the players were excited about it. They thought they had something cooking, and we had some dudes finally on the football team. But there are so many difficulties in winning in the NFL. And, probably the biggest thing is just that availability thing, especially on the offensive line. The continuity aspect of it, I think that's something we'll focus on, until it's properly aligned, where guys are the same five coming out, hopefully, every single week for the 2025 season.
Yeah, and that is obtainable. And that's one thing the Bears really have to focus on, and that's everybody, the coaching staff, Ryan Poles, the type of talent you bring in here. You got to bring in a group of guys that maybe are spearheaded by guys like Darnell Wright, who has got a super bright future ahead of him. And I think his upside he has not even scratched the surface of what he can be. But he's got to be that type of guy that transitions this offensive line from uncertainty to certainty. And I think he has every capability of doing that. And so I really, have really high hopes for what Darnell can do in his career.
Tastes like Miller time. Go to MillerLite.com/BearsPod to find delivery options near you. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. It's interesting to look at the collective, the entire 18-week season, 17 games, and see what was produced. It doesn't all equate to wins or losses, but it's just some of the things that may be surprising to people. Of what went well, we certainly know it didn't go well. Obviously, the sacks were too many, 68 for the year. Most sacked quarterback on first down in the NFL with 22. So that was a really a heck of a place to start, frankly, because first down is so critical, both offensively and defensively. And then that leads into first quarter and fourth quarter. So let's begin there. Let's begin with that, Tommy, because the slow starts were really something that was emphasized over the course of the year, and then how the fourth quarter, now you'd like to see that kind of production level out, get into the first quarter. But the Bears were 3-1 with a halftime lead at home this year, 1-0 on the road. So 4 of their 5 wins, they had lead at halftime. Losing at halftime, 1-11. So they had an NFL low 27 points in the first quarter, number 30 in the first half, but in the fourth quarter, they ranked 12th in points scored. They did not score a touchdown on their first possession. Pittsburgh and Seattle were the only other teams that did not, so they only wound up with 6 first possession points. They made 2 field goals, missed 1, and had 13 punts. They got better in the first possession of the second half. They had 4 touchdowns. So as you look at it, if there is a common denominator that we ask coaches, we ask players, no one can really say what it was. Do you have an answer for what the first quarter common denominator would be with the lack of production?
the thing about it is you're bringing in an inexperienced quarterback, and the only reason he's inexperienced in a professional level because he's a rookie. He's a guy that was just recently brought aboard that had so many different things on his plate, from being the first pick in the draft, from learning a new system, learning all that terminology, learning how the key components fit according to what he's saying in the huddle. And then you have an offensive line that, Darnell Wright and Coleman Shelton are the only two guys that really played, a majority of the snaps at the position that they were picked to play. And you can't really underestimate the difficulty of that for a football team, because now when you're talking about in preparation for whomever your next opponent is and where you play them, there's a lot of advantages that you give the opponent's defensive coordinator, because they know that you have a young, inexperienced quarterback, and they know that you have an offensive line that's going through some health issues that maybe there are certain instances that are attackable. So they beat Tennessee at home week 1. Then they go into 2 hostile environments in Houston and in Indianapolis. And that's, to me, as an ex-offensive lineman, as an offensive lineman that has played with young quarterbacks, that's always an advantage for the opponent, because you get a supportive crowd noise. It's super loud. And now you create a little bit of a dysfunction that can take you a little bit to get over the hump. So listen, this is not a curable stat, analytic or whatever. This is something that the Bears will be an entirely different team next year in the first half than they were this year, because now you're allowing Caleb to contribute from experience rather than just being an inexperienced guy playing the most important position in professional sports. Because the thing about it is you play at home and you feel the support and the introduction of the offense, and the crowd is behind you, and that house was packed, man. They were so excited to see Caleb and an entire Chicago Bear team and what they're going to offer them. But then you kind of had the same thing when you were going down to Houston week 2, because here they are coming off of a playoff experience a year ago, and now they are creating an environment that's one of the more difficult to communicate indoors like that. So, every single first-time experience going to any stadium for a rookie is a first-time experience, and it's kind of hard to explain, but it is a new experience.
In the fourth quarter, Caleb had the most passing attempts in the NFL, 180, and fifth most passing yards, 1108, completed 66% of his passes, 10 touchdowns. That was fifth best, tied for fifth best in the NFL. And just 2 interceptions and a 95.3 quarterback rating. So, a lot of that was working from behind. But there were about 8 games in which he had the ball in his hands in the fourth quarter with a chance to tie or take the lead. It happened a couple times, but right. A couple times it did not, because of all the well-documented missteps. But that's encouraging to me. I need my quarterback to be able to do that in the fourth quarter. So this is not, to me, a negative stat at all. It's a positive stat.
I agree 100% with you. And it's something that held my attention throughout the season, because even though, we are kind of a little bit flustered in the first quarter because of lack of production and lack of points, but there he was in the fourth quarter making these heroic efforts, whether he's buying time behind the line of scrimmage, whether he's making these accurate passes that he's fitting in to such a tight window, the receivers coming up and making big catches for him. Probably the thing that left the most positive feeling at the end of the season is the fourth quarter experiences, the efforts, and the production that Caleb was able to provide with his teammates.
Again, we're painting a picture from 17 weeks. Yes, in between there are some dips along the way and some highs as well. But this ties into the complementary football thing, because listen to what the defense did then in the second half. Second half defense tied for fifth in third quarter and fourth quarter points allowed, and number 3 overall in the fewest second half points. Just 8.7 points per game allowed in the second half by the Bears defense. That gave the Bears an opportunity to hang in the games, and then Caleb did his best to deliver in the fourth quarter. That's also significant because it signifies a defense that did not quit. You look at their red zone defense. They wound up as the number 2 red zone touchdown efficiency defense in the NFL, despite the fact they gave up. I shouldn't say gave up. They were driven on the tied for second most red zone drives in the NFL at 63. So also inside the 30 scoring, Bears were in the top 5 in the NFL. So they buckled down and they bowed up their necks when they needed to. They held teams to field goals.
Yeah. You know, one thing that game that really comes to mind was the Thanksgiving Day game in Detroit, because everything that you want to think about the first half, the reason the Bears were in it in the second half is because the lack of production by Detroit in the first half when they got into the red zone. And then you go there and you make some halftime adjustments, and then you come out and you immediately are competitive right down to the last series of the game. So, yeah, one thing that was the great thing about this defense is that they tighten the windows of opportunity for their opponents to succeed in the red zone. That's why a lot of these drives ended on field goals. And so I think that's something, if you can bring that with you to next year's development, I think that your opportunities are going to extend themselves, because you have a super stingy defense holding your opponents to 3 points and then allowing your defense to have some more scoring opportunities in the first half.
Yeah, and on top of that, Tom, they took the ball away in the red zone. 5 takeaways, tied for second best in the NFL. Bears had 1 red zone turnover this year offensively. We're brought to you by PNC, official bank of the Bears. So this game comes down to points, Tom. You got to score points. In this division, you're going to have to score points because the other 3 teams are scoring points. At least we think they're going to continue to be very strong in that regard. So the Lions led the NFL in touchdown drives with 68. Packers were 8th at 51. The Vikings were 9th at 44. All top 10. The Bears were tied for 25th at 33, but in addition to that, they tried the fewest number of field goals in the NFL at 25, those automatic points that you can count on. Obviously, they had the second most punts in the NFL. So I'm saying here, you got to close that gap somehow within your own division to get into the mix here, and you got to find a way to score points. And that is a byproduct, of course, of big plays. And the Bears ranked in near the bottom of the NFL in that, while those 3 teams are all top 10 with at least 70 plays of 20 or more yards. Bears were at 47. So again, I believe that growth will happen. But to keep an eye on it when you're rebuilding what you're going to have for 2025 time, don't you have to look at the division first?
Yeah, but you're going to have to look at the division, because you got to, win the division in order to get in the playoffs. That's an obvious. But the thing about it is, when you look at those touchdown totals for each and every team, they're not going to be with Caleb in regards to the opening quarters of next year's efforts. They're not going to be as controlled in the environment. They're going to be much more aggressive. And I think when you allow your quarterback to be much more aggressive with the type of talent that they have in this offense, that is going to result in a lot more touchdowns. So as much as we sit here and talk about the production of the other teams, I think the Bears have a big void to fill with production that's going to get them right into those competitive numbers with the rest of the teams in our division. And I think that has a lot to do with the experiences that Caleb got starting every game this year, and how much more aggressive they're going to be able to be, because they're going to know how he's going to react in environments that are not friendly, environments on the road. And I think they know a lot more about Caleb in terms of his quarterback play under those circumstances.
Have a new or gently used coat laying around? Head to your local Jewel Osco until February 10th and donate one of your new or gently used coats to the 36th Annual Chicago Bears Coat Drive. Help keep Chicagoans warm this winter. All right, time to look at our Players of the Year. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Rookie of the Year. You go first. And if we're the same, we're the same. We're the same, we're the same, right?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Rome. And I know what Caleb had on his plate and what he was able to do. And I said the quarterback position is the most important position in football. But I think what Rome was able to do all year long, he was able to be included in all the targeting. He ran every route as well as, the veterans on the team. He's got the speed to break open big plays, and he's got the catchability that you're not necessarily being coached on how to catch the ball. It's some innate ability that you have within you. And so everything I've seen out of Rome since he's been here, his speed, his size, his trustability by Caleb. Those are all the elements that I need in counterpart receivers when you talk about guys like DJ.
All right, here's a stat for you, and this will be our Geico More Football stat of the week. Rome Odunze finished 11th in the league in targeted air yard average, according to Next Gen Stats, of 13.7. That's double the next guy on the Bears list, DJ, at 7.4. So if there was a big throw to be had, Caleb was looking for Rome Odunze. That's what that tells me right there. 13.7 targeted air yard average for Rome Odunze, who finished just behind Keenan Allen in yards. So I like your pick. I was going to go in that direction as well, but I went with Caleb. 7th most passing attempts in the NFL, most in a single season in Bears history with 562. 1 of 13 to hit 500-plus. Burrow, the only one with 600-plus throws in the NFL this year. 10th in completions, 17th in passing yards. That's a pretty good, given the situation, given the turmoil, given the changing coaches, he still finished. And granted, Bears trailed a lot, so he had to put the ball up, but 17th in passing yards in your rookie year, top 20 in the NFL, top 18 at 35.41. He was also 10th, Tom, in third down rushing with 169. Here's where I'd like to see that improve, because that clearly he was under pressure a lot. So he's scrambling for his life. But he picked up 9 first downs, and I know how you always say, you used to, when we used to pick Tom's keys to the game and gave very statistical, very distinct. No, if he gets 4 rushing first downs, Bears are going to win.
Right.
But to that end, I'm looking at this, and so he was right there in the mix with all the top quarterbacks. But the number 1 third down rusher, regardless of position in the NFL in 2024, was Jalen Hurts. Okay? Jalen Hurts was the most. And he had 223 yards, not that many more than Caleb. But he had 29 first downs.
Listen, I think Caleb is more than capable of that. But Caleb is also a guy that stays behind the line of scrimmage and wants to find a receiver to get his first down, and he doesn't want to necessarily run for first down. That's the reason why Caleb started 17 games and Jalen Hurts didn't.
Yep.
So I'm all for. Listen, man, I'm all for Caleb taking his time, using his avoidability with his vision downfield to find out the best way to get the ball out of his hands efficiently.
I found it interesting too, because their stats, we can go through stats all day long. There's hundreds of them, but I was shocked because most of the time Bears line up in 3 wide receiver sets. You would assume, right? Get 3 great receivers. But they only threw 135 passes in a 3 wide receiver set in 2024. So if you do the math, and I don't have my calculator, 17 into 135, that's not a lot per game. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't. It doesn't, because they're not, they're throwing the ball out of sets that are deceptive to the run. So they want them thinking run, but they still have receivers. When you have the receivers that the Bears had, including the tight end position, you don't need to run 4 and 5 wide receiver sets. You can run successful downfield passing game with a 2 receiver set, keep the tight end maybe to chip and help, keep a running back in to chip and help, and more to give yourself an open opportunity downfield. As Caleb gets more experienced, then you'll probably see more multiple receiver sets.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Illinois, right here at home, driving access toward healthier communities through it all. All right, let's go to Offensive Player of the Year, Tommy. I always will defer to you. You are the offensive lineman, and you are older than me by a year.
This may catch a lot of people off guard, but I'm going with Coleman Shelton. And you and I talked a little bit about this the other day, because he was the saving grace of that offensive line. When you had an early preseason injury to Ryan Bates, early season injury to Ryan Bates, Coleman Shelton held down the fort. And he held down the fort with a rookie quarterback under some really hostile environments. And if you just, for example, say you brought in Ryan Bates, but you didn't bring in Coleman Shelton. Ryan Bates had an injury issue. Now, I know they have Doug Kramer there, who's a center by trade, but Coleman Shelton has experience in the NFL. He understands his assignments. He understands every other offensive lineman's assignments. He understands how the running backs fit into their protections. He understands the linebackers of responsibilities. And there's just a lot of times that the center is the most settling player for a quarterback of all of them. It's not a wide receiver saying, hey, I'm open. It's not any other exterior. It's about that relationship between a center and a quarterback, and it's really special.
All right, I'm going to go with DJ Moore, tied for 13th in the league in targets with 140, had the highest average yard after the catch at 6.2, and 596 yards after the catch. That was 5th best in the NFL. And 3rd among wide receivers is yards after the catch, trailing only Jamar Chase, who won the Triple Crown of wide receivers this year in Cincinnati. And they, of course, threw the ball 600 times. And Buffalo's Khalil Shakir. So there you go with the Offensive Player of the Year. I think we both think a ton of DJ's talent and his importance on this football team.
Oh, I love that guy. I mean, listen, man, give me all the DJ that you can possibly give me. He's a professional. He's got superior catching ability. He's courageous. He's tough. He bounces back. I could sit here and say a half hour worth of glowing, compliments for DJ.
All right, Defensive Player of the Year, Tommy.
I would like to go with Kyler Gordon, but I'm going to go with TJ Edwards. Because to me, TJ Edwards, when you look at the amount of tackles that he's put up in the last 2 years, you look at his effort when he's going to make a tackle. You look at how he closes the distance and he finishes the play with such a ferocious style of hitting. To me, TJ is an example of a great Chicago Bear linebacker over history of the position. And no matter, I think, what style of defense you want to play him in, I think he would be successful in a Bear defense, a 34 defense, a 4-3 defense, wherever you want to play him. Like you say, he's just a football player.
I appreciate the violence with which he plays. We heard Thomas Brown saying, hey, we got a violent game. TJ Edwards plays violently. When he hits you, you feel it. You're going sideways, you're going backwards, and you're going to take a big hit.
Right. I mean, listen, the linebackers that we've had the good fortune to broadcast about, guys like Lance Briggs and guys like Urlacher and other guys in there as well. He kind of has that kind of delivery to the conclusion of the play, and he's speeding up when he tackles. He's not slowing down. And I think it's evident when you look at the shock that the ball carrier feels when TJ Edwards hits him.
By the way, I finished 15th in the NFL in solo tackles. I, too, am going with TJ Edwards. The Bears, again, the red zone defense, some of that is him. The takeaways, some of that is him. Inside the scoring, Bears ranked 7th. Some of that is him. I look at him as an outstanding leader on this team. He's on the reserve side, but I think there's a lot of mutual respect for him on that roster. 129 tackles, over 100 for the 4th time in his 6 years. 4th Bears defender with 125 or more in team history more than once. That's crazy. And the solo tackles included 4 sacks, career high for him. 6.5 stuffs, number 1 on the team. That's a run stuff. That's getting in the gap and making somebody get behind the line of scrimmage. 1 interception, could have had more. 6 quarterback hurries, those are hits. 12 tackles for loss, a forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries, and 3 pass breakups. He did a lot.
Well, you know what, too, is with TJ Edwards, he kind of stands out amongst all the guys. But, guys like Kevin Byard and Kyler Gordon, both of those guys, too, they should have an asterisk next to their name as high consideration.
Oh, you still have time. We got a bunch of categories here, Tommy. You got time.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Special Teams Player of the Year, Tommy.
Josh Blackwell, who is this week's NFC Special Teams Player of the Week. But look at all the areas that he filled the void, and he takes part in every single special team. He's super productive, whether he has the ball in his hands or he's going to make an open field tackle. So everything that Josh has been, what he's done since he's been here, he's kind of in that category of the other special teamers that we've been able to broadcast about throughout our career.
There have been a bunch of them, really good ones. He finished with 7 special teams tackles, but don't even focus on that number. I'll tell you why. Because as a gunner, he was always first on the scene, whether that was pushing somebody into another tackle, Tommy, or just being violent on the special teams with his own hits. And then you throw in the punt return. There's a great deal of trust in him from Richard Hightower, the Bears special teams coordinator. And he talks about him in glowing terms. Super smart guy. And he's got his hand up. He wanted to be a punt returner, and that was one of the plays of the year, obviously, in the NFL. I'm going to go with Torrey Taylor. Finished, I know that's low-hanging fruit. But he tied for fourth in the NFL with 34 inside the 20. That was important. That's why he's here. To field position, to punt and pin. Number 2 in the NFC behind New Orleans, Matthew Hayball. How about that for a punter's name? Hayball. Right. Yeah. 20th in net average, 15th in gross average. But those two finished number one in Bears history in a single season. He broke a record that was held since 1949, and I don't know if this is the right pronunciation. I need to call Pat McCaskey. George Gulianakis at 41.6 net in a single season. That's number one in the Bears history. Also, same story with the gross average and the net average. So, outstanding job. 38 50-plus yard punts, number 4 in the NFL, number 2 in the NFC, behind Seattle's Michael Dixon. And the Bears also as a special teams unit. This has nothing to do with Torrey Taylor, but an ode to the special teams unit. The first team in the NFL this year with multiple block punts in a season, most by a Bears team in a single season since 2008. So special teams had some very, very good moments over the course of the season. And, of course, Cairo Santos, he didn't get many opportunities. He did have a block. I guess he had a couple blocks, actually, but he was 21 of 24 kicking field goals. You can count on Cairo.
Yeah, I mean, listen, man, that guy has done everything asked of him since the moment he came aboard, and there's as much pressure on a kicker than there is in any position in the NFL. And when you're a kicker that's made a career out of kicking in Soldier Field, natural surface and outside conditions, Cairo has been a model citizen at the kicker position.
All right, I'm going to throw this one at you. The surprise player of the year, meaning he went the furthest, the fastest, and from where we thought he was when the season was in mini camps and training camps. And if you need a minute, I'll throw mine out there. Your call.
Let me hear what you're thinking.
Well, I'm going Daniel Hardy. Daniel Hardy.
Yeah, okay.
The expectations of this player. He was a man out there. He was a beast on special teams. He was tied with Agbangbamiga with 11 tackles on special teams. Had the block punt in week 1. That was a scoop and score for Jonathan Owens. He had a few penalties on special teams, no question about that. But just his demeanor on game day was hair on fire, physical, aggressive, violent. And I know you were asking to have him on the pass rush, and he did sneak in there a couple times this year. I'd like to see that player continue to develop. Have you any history of players that started on special teams as a defensive lineman like that? I mean, he was moving, man, and he's not a small guy, and then became a rotational figure on the defense and get you 5 or 6 sacks a year or something like that.
Right. All right, I'm going to go to one, and this is super obscure, and I'm thinking of the future, not necessarily present, but because of what I saw out of Austin Booker as incoming freshman, incoming rookie for that he's got the innate skills, the innate ability to be able to rush the passer, and he's the type of guy that, if you get him through that initial year of football, you get him to invest time in an off season. He's in the weight room. He's eating correctly. He's getting stronger. He gets a larger arsenal of pass rush skills. Now you're talking about a guy that can go from whatever number he had this year up to near double digits within a 1-year jump. So I'm not disappointed in Austin Booker. I wish that he would have had more pass rushing opportunities. However, I think that he still has a tremendous upside and can develop into that counter rusher to Montez Sweat that the Bears they need in part of their rotation.
Well, first of all, he's only 22 years old. That's
Correct.
Number one. He was, for the most part of this year, he turned 22 in December. He was a 21-year-old guy. If he would have stayed at Kansas, he might have been a first-round pick. And I looked at my old notes from the Senior Bowl that I'm getting ready for again, and he was considered the guy who had the best bend and that arc to get to the quarterback. His body flexible enough, and I think we saw that quite a bit. He was in there. He was disruptive. So for the year, he wound up with 20 tackles, which is very good for a part-time defensive lineman. 20 tackles for a part-timer? That's pretty darn good. A sack and a half. You had one against Carolina, half a sack against Detroit on Thanksgiving. A stuff and a half, 4 quarterback hits, 3 tackles for loss, and 1 special teams tackle. But you're talking about a guy that was one of the team leaders in tackles for defensive linemen. That's pretty good.
And, the thing about Austin is what I want to see in the future is he's got a couple pass rush moves that he didn't use very much, and they're really hard to teach. Like, I think it might have been his first or second pass rush in full pads this year in training camp. He did an inside spin on the offensive tackle, and he left the offensive tackle, kind of sitting still, and he made immediate pressure. And so from some of the guys throughout my career that I've seen that have that move, that isn't really teachable physical because you have to have superior balance and quickness, and then you have to have the timing that you get the offensive tackle off balance. Those are the types of things that I have expectations for Austin Booker to be that near double-digit sacker in the immediate future.
He'll get stronger in this offseason to not have that benefit, And again, as a young guy.
You're just not going to have that senior college draft fatigue that you have. Now he's going to finally have a chance to regroup. And, remember the shock of us seeing Dominique Robinson when he showed up back this year and how different he looked? I don't necessarily need to see that out of Austin Booker, but I do need to see him look like he's added a little bit to his frame, because I think strength is speed and speed is strength. That's a quote from our dear friend Clyde Emmerich.
283 snaps, so he played 26% of the defensive snaps, and so I think the production, that's all right. All right, strongest position group of the year. I'm
gonna go with defensive backfield. I know that when you look at Jalen making the Pro Bowl, they brought in Kevin Byard. He was an immediate influence on this football team. Too bad what happened to Jaquan Brisker. You still have Kyler Gordon back there. You have Terrell Smith. You have Tyreek Stevenson. I think that Tyreek, again, I think he's the most ferocious tackler of the defensive backfield. Kyler Gordon is the most deployable. You have other guys like Josh Blackwell and Elijah Hicks and stuff that were contributors to the defensive backfield. So of one of the hardest positions to play in the NFL, I think they had really good coaching there, and they had a group of guys that were able to contribute at a high level.
I am going to give the wide receivers the strongest position group because in the end, the trio all got over 100 targets. And again, Caleb finished in the top 20 in passing yards, so that directly is attached for the most part to your wide receivers. I'm not going to discount what Cole Kmet or DeAndre Swift did in the passing game, but some good stuff there. We already talked about what DJ did, what Adunze did, and also Keenan Allen made some big third down catches as he's done his entire career. Steinhoffels is our sponsor of the Bears Etc. podcast, and Steinhoffels, a proud partner of the Bears and now open in Orland Park. Steinhoffels is Chicagoland's furniture and mattress leader with the largest selection to fit every style and budget, and 100% employee-owned. Shop in-store and online at steinhoffels.com. All right, last one. Hardest working player of the year.
It may be a guy. Golly. See, I mean... I
There's a lot of choices.
I love TJ with that. But, the guy that I really liked that finished the season injured was Andrew Billings, because he has a really thankless job, and you really don't notice him until he's gone. You don't know what he means to the workmanship of the defensive line until he's gone. And when Andrew Billings left the defense, they were a little bit more susceptible to interior runs. And so Andrew Billings is, he's not going to be there standing at the podium, meeting the media that often, but his production, his persona, his swagger, his alphaness in the locker room is something that the Bears need. So from the time I saw Andrew Billings start training camp this year to being in control of the calls of the defensive line, I think he's a guy that worked extremely hard, because his work is not only during the season, it's also in the weight room in the off season. And I do think that's the type of influence that you need that walks into that locker room and walks onto the practice field.
That was mentioned by Ryan Poles as one of the biggest losses, no question, turned into one of his favorite players. And that's Andrew Billings, and he's on his way back, ready to go. He says he'll be healthy.
Andrew Billings, he played havoc in the training camp when he was making the calls for the defensive lineman to move and shift, whether it was against his own offensive line or when Cincinnati came in here. He was the type of guy that really challenged the communication discipline on the offensive line because of the calls he makes.
I'm going with Kyler Gordon, and the reason is, yes, he's a hair on fire type of player all over the field, but it's one of the more difficult positions to play. We've documented this. You got to know everybody's responsibility. You got to handle tight ends, running backs, wide receivers, work in the slot, work outside, stuff in the run game, blitz, which he did a fair amount. Wound up with a career-high 75 tackles and no less than 4 in all but one game when he had 3 against Detroit. He had 10 hits on the quarterback. That's an element of the blitz game. And he allowed only 29 pass completions all year. So I'm going to go with him. And if I had to give a 1A, because I really like this player, Tom, I really like DeMarcus Walker. DeMarcus Walker,
me too. I agree.
In his last 25 games as a Bear, he's got 27 hits on the quarterback. Montez Sweat has 26 hits on the quarterback in the last 25 games with the Bears. So, the production is there. He just doesn't get a lot of attention. Now, hits on the quarterback, they matter. Obviously, we want to see sacks. And if the guy gets rid of the football, by the time he gets there, it's still a hit on the quarterback. I just think he really does a nice job of putting the heat on the quarterback.
Yeah. Everybody's name you just mentioned, and I was just thinking this because you kind of made me think of it. I think my favorite hit on a quarterback all year was this last week, Kevin Byard hitting the Green Bay quarterback, because he defeated a block at the line of scrimmage. The quarterback had no idea he was coming, and he never slowed down. And he lit him up. And of all the the sacks you talk about on this team, all the big hits and stuff, that was probably my favorite quarterback hit of the year.
3.3 seconds. And Next Gen Stats had it. 3.3 seconds to hit the quarterback on that one. I went and tried to look up all year what the fastest one. I believe Tremaine Edmonds' week 1 against Tennessee was a 3-second sack on Will Levis. But that's pretty good, man. That was that was one of the best hits of the year. No question.
It was, and two, first of all, defeating the block at the line of scrimmage with such immediacy to get him in position to close the distance and make that hit. There's a lot that went into that play. And when you talk about the different roles and the different lineup position of a guy like Kyler Gordon, I was exciting to see that in the latter part of the year, they were giving Kevin Byard some of that opportunities.
All right, a couple other stats. We're done with the players of the year. That was a fun exercise, actually. This is just something in the category of kind of a wow. Cole Kmet had the highest catch percentage of any receiver in the NFL, regardless of position. He caught 85.45% of his passes. 9 of the top 11 in top catch percentage were tight ends in the NFL. So what we're saying is, yes, we'd like to see him more involved in the offense, somehow, some way.
Well, the thing about it is when we talk about the lack of production in the first half and in the first quarter specifically, that's got to be a Cole Kmet time, because I do think that the matchup difficulties for the opponents against Cole Kmet is evident and obvious. You're not going to be able to get a running back or a linebacker that's going to run well with Cole, and you're not going to have a defensive back that can have the size requirements that you do against Cole. He's courageous in his catches. He's got really good hands. He stands on his feet after he makes the catch, and he gets yards after the catch. So if you want to say, okay, what am I going to immediately start thinking about to increase my production in the first half next year? It's going to be about targets for Cole.
And listen, so he also had the highest average separation yards on average of any receiver on the team at 3.9. So he got a 4-yard advantage of separation on his opponent. So that tells me, top 15 in the NFL, regardless of position. That's pretty good. That means he's getting open.
And he can come out of every stance. He can come out of a 2-point stance that's just relaxed a little bit from the line of scrimmage. He can come out of a 3-point stance. He can line up as a wide receiver. He can line up as an H-back. He can line up as a fullback. So the different areas that you give him his start is a lot of different ways to create open opportunities for him.
All right, good news, Chicago. United Airlines is getting brand new planes with all the bells and whistles like Bluetooth connectivity, screens at every seat, and room for everyone's roller bag. United, proud to fly the Chicago Bears, and you too. Hope that was a fun exercise for you, Tommy. Enjoyed it. Some good stuff to look at as a building platform for the next season. And the Bears did do plenty of good things that should have, in most cases, or could have resulted in more wins. So moving on, and we'll start looking toward the future as we go through our podcasts in the coming weeks as the coaching search is well underway. I'm
excited to see what's ahead, and I can't wait to get a chance to talk about everything that's going on. But listen, I got a Notre Dame Penn State game to start worrying about right now. So,
good luck. Good luck.
That's going to occupy a little time, too.
For Tom Thayer, I'm Jeff Joniak. Thanks for listening, everybody. Please subscribe now on the Chicago Bears official app, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Bear down, everybody.